If you've ever had a moment in your life when the past suddenly walked right up to you and changed everything you thought you knew, then you'll understand what happened to me that evening. I never expected my cousin's quiet friend to stop me in the parking area, and I definitely wasn't prepared for what he needed to tell me. Stay with me, because this story took a turn I never saw coming. Before we begin, let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I love seeing our community stretch across the country. And if you're enjoying stories like this, please remember to subscribe to the channel and tap that like button. It helps more than you know. Now, let me take you back to the moment it all started. I was leaving the grocery store just before dusk, that time when the sky looks washed in soft oranges and tired blues. It had been a long day at work, long enough that my shoulder bag felt heavier than usual, and my patience was just about spent. I remember adjusting my keys between my fingers as I stepped out into the parking area, telling myself I'd earned a quiet evening, and maybe a simple dinner at home. That's when I saw him. At first, I didn't even recognize him. He was leaning against a car a few spaces away from mine, hands tucked into the pockets of a faded jacket, head slightly lowered like he was thinking through something important. It wasn't until he lifted his eyes and gave a half smile that I realized it was Eric, my cousin's friend from years back. I hadn't seen him in almost a decade. He had the same steady gaze I remembered, though there was something softer in it now, something almost hesitant. I paused mid-step, surprised enough to let out a small, breathy laugh. It felt strange to see someone connected to old family memories standing there as if no time had passed at all. He took a few steps toward me, slow and careful, as though he wasn't sure how welcome he'd be. "Hey," he said, voice a little lower than I remembered. "Hi, I'm sorry to catch you like this. Do you have a minute?" There was nothing dramatic about the moment, no sudden music or dramatic lighting, but I felt a small tug of unease, gentle, not frightening, more like the feeling you get when you know someone's about to tell you something that matters. I nodded and walked toward him, my footsteps echoing lightly off the concrete. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Last I heard, you moved out of state." He gave a quiet laugh. "I did. Just got back last week. Needed to find you. Well, wanted to, for something I should have said a long time ago." That took me by surprise. I wasn't sure what he meant, but his tone was thoughtful, almost weighed down, like he had been carrying something for far too long. The fading light stretched shadows across the pavement, and cars passed occasionally at the far edge of the lot. It was such an ordinary place for a moment that didn't feel ordinary at all. I leaned lightly against the side of my own car, trying to settle my nerves. "Eric, you're starting to worry me," I said, though my voice stayed gentle. "Did something happen?" He shook his head. "Nothing bad. I promise. I should probably start from the beginning. I've been trying to figure out how to say this without sounding strange." There was a vulnerable honesty in the way he said it that softened my tension. He wasn't here to cause trouble. He wasn't here to bring drama. He was here because something in his heart had finally pushed him out of hiding. I folded my arms loosely, watching him as he shifted his weight. His eyes weren't fixed on me entirely. They drifted occasionally toward the ground, like he was trying to choose the right doorway into a difficult conversation. "I didn't come here to upset you," he continued quietly. "I just wanted to talk. I've been thinking about the past more than I expected to lately, and thinking about you." The words hung between us, simple but meaningful. Not inappropriate, not heavy-handed, just honest. And honesty, I've learned, has a way of reaching places inside you that you didn't realize were still unlocked. The breeze picked up a little, blowing a loose strand of hair across my face. I tucked it behind my ear, feeling something shift within me. An old curiosity, a sense of familiarity from another time in my life when everything felt different. I took a breath, slow and steady. "All right," I said. "I'm listening." And that's where everything truly began, in that quiet parking area, under a fading sky, with a man I hadn't expected to see again standing in front of me, gathering the courage to finally speak the truth he'd held onto for far too long. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The parking area had grown quieter as the evening settled in, the sky now dipping into deeper blues that made the streetlights flicker to life one by one. Their warm glow cast soft halos against the pavement, giving everything a calm, almost reflective stillness. I could hear the hum of a distant engine, a cart being pushed back toward the store, and somewhere far behind us, the muted sound of someone laughing as they walked away with their groceries. Eric took a breath, as if steadying himself. His hands tightened briefly inside the pockets of his jacket before he finally met my eyes again. "I guess I should have said this years ago," he began, his voice low but steady. "But back then, everything felt too complicated. I wasn't sure what was right, and by the time I figured it out, life had already moved us in different directions." I listened quietly, a mix of curiosity and a faint ache forming in my chest. I wasn't sure yet where he was going with this, but something in his tone told me it wasn't something reckless or dramatic. It was something sincere. "I left town," he continued, "because I needed to make changes in my life. I wasn't proud of how scattered I was then. I think you saw some of that. You were always kind to me anyway, even when I didn't deserve it." I couldn't help but smile softly at that. "Everyone goes through messy years, Eric. You weren't the only one." He nodded. "True, but even then, I noticed things I didn't know how to talk about. You probably don't remember this, but when we were at that barbecue at your cousin's place, must have been 10, maybe 11 years ago, you sat with me for a while on the back porch. You asked how I was doing, not just in general, but really doing. I didn't know how to answer you then." I remembered the moment more clearly than I expected. The old wooden porch, the sound of cicadas, the way he had avoided eye contact the entire time. At the time, I thought he just needed space. I never imagined it had stayed with him all these years. "I think about that day a lot," he admitted. "Not because you said anything dramatic, but because it was the first time someone saw past the surface I kept putting up. And when I realized what that meant, I guess I didn't know how to deal with it. So I left town, told myself it was for the best." He paused again, his jaw shifting slightly like he was still trying to decide how much to say. The air between us felt more open now, less uncertain, though the weight of what he was building toward still lingered in the quiet. "Coming back here," he said slowly, "I wasn't sure if I should reach out. I didn't want to bring confusion into your life. But the truth is, I came back because I owed you honesty. Not because I expect anything from you. Just because it felt wrong to keep something important buried forever." I felt my heart steady, not racing, just opening. There is a kind of sincerity that doesn't push or demand, but instead settles gently in front of you and waits. That was what he was offering now. I shifted my weight slightly, leaning back against the car. "Eric," I said softly, "you're being very thoughtful, but you still haven't said what it is you came to tell me." He gave a nervous laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I know. I'm circling it." He looked away, then back, gathering courage like someone stepping into a pool of cold water 1 inch at a time. "What I came to say is, you mattered to me. More than I ever admitted. I carried that with me for years, even when I tried not to." The words were simple, but they landed with an unexpected warmth, like someone turning on a quiet light in a room you didn't realize had gone dim. I drew in a slow breath, letting the moment settle between us. He wasn't declaring anything dramatic. He wasn't trying to disrupt my life. He was sharing something deeply personal, something he had held onto through changes, distance, and time. I looked at him carefully. "Why now?" I asked, not accusing, just wanting to understand. He glanced around the parking area, as if searching for the right way to explain himself. "Because I'm older now. because life feels shorter than it used to. And because when I came back and saw some of the old places again, I realized I didn't want to keep certain regrets locked away. I wanted to speak to you with the respect you deserved back then. A warmth spread through me, not romantic, not overwhelming, but deeply human, an appreciation for being seen, truly seen, even after so many years. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air around us was calm, almost peaceful, like the world had paused just long enough for a truth to be set down gently between us. Finally, I nodded. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for trusting me with that." His shoulders eased, like a weight had finally loosened. The sun had completely dipped below the horizon now, and the parking area took on that calm that comes just before the real night settles in. As we stood there, I felt something shift, not a dramatic ending, but the beginning of something neither of us fully understood yet. "Would you mind," he asked gently, "if we talked a little more? Not everything at once. Just a little more." And with a small, steady breath, I said, "Yes, I don't mind at all." We walked a short distance away from the row of cars, not far, just enough to settle into a quieter corner of the lot where the glow of a single light pole created a gentle circle of warmth around us. The air had cooled, carrying that crisp hint that comes just before the night fully settles. I folded my arms, not out of discomfort but out of instinct, and watched as Eric paced a slow, thoughtful line before finally stopping across from me. He looked calmer than he had earlier, though still thoughtful, like he was turning over pieces of his memory and deciding which ones needed to be shared. I had appreciated that he wasn't rushing anything. He approached this conversation the way someone approaches a fragile keepsake, carefully, with respect. "So," I said, breaking the quiet first, "you came back. You tracked me down. And you told me something I never expected. But I'm still trying to understand what you're hoping for. Clarity? Closure?" He smiled faintly, not defensive, just honest. "Maybe both. Maybe neither. I'm not trying to rewrite the past. I just wanted to have a real conversation with you for the first time in years." I nodded, accepting that answer more easily than I expected. "All right," I said. "So let's talk." He let out a breath, almost a relieved one, and leaned lightly against a nearby concrete barrier. "It's strange being back here," he admitted. "Everything looks the same but feels different. You know how places get tied to certain memories? That's how it is for me. I'd walk by somewhere, and I remember who I was back then, and sometimes I barely recognize that version of myself." "I understand," I said. "Life changes us more quietly than we expect." "Exactly," he replied. "And sometimes you don't realize how much until you come home again." He paused, studying me with a thoughtful expression. "I know this might sound strange after all this time, but I want you to know something. The reason you stuck in my mind it wasn't anything dramatic. It was because you made me feel steady at a time when I didn't have much steadiness of my own." I looked down briefly, feeling an unexpected warmth rise in my face. Not embarrassment, just humility. Most people go through life never knowing the quiet ways they've affected others, and hearing it spoken aloud like that carries its own kind of weight. "I didn't do anything special," I murmured. "You did more than you knew," he said gently. "Sometimes a conversation can change a person's direction, even if they don't admit it for a long time." Silence drifted between us again, but it was a comfortable one this time. I watched the shadows move across the pavement as a car passed at the far end of the lot, its headlights stretching long arcs of light before fading again. The world around us felt distant, like we were standing inside a small pocket of time carved out just for this moment. I finally asked the question that had been forming quietly in the back of my mind. "So now that you've said what you needed to say, what happens next?" He rubbed his thumb along the side of his palm slowly, thinking. "I don't have a plan," he admitted. "I didn't come here expecting anything from you. But I did hope, just a little, that maybe we could talk now in a way we never could before. Two adults, older and hopefully wiser. Something about the way he said older made me smile. Life does have a way of giving us second chances, I said softly, if we're willing to take them. He lifted his eyes again, and there was a calm steadiness there that hadn't been present earlier. Exactly. That's all I'm asking for. A chance for an honest connection. Nothing rushed. Nothing assumed. It struck me how unusual this whole encounter was. Unexpected, yes, but deeply respectful. There was no pressure in his voice, no hidden agenda, just reflection, and a quiet sincerity. I took a small step closer, standing now within the soft glow of the light pole. You know, I said, I wasn't expecting tonight to be anything more than groceries and a tired drive home. But here we are, talking about years we didn't think mattered anymore. He laughed softly, the sound warm and genuine. Life surprises us when we least expect it. I suppose it does. For the first time since we started talking, he looked relaxed, shoulders lowered, expression open. It was as if sharing his truth had settled something inside him. I'd like to see you again, he said carefully, not pushing. Just to talk, maybe over coffee, if you'd be comfortable with that. I looked at him for a long moment, letting myself consider it honestly without rushing. And the truth was, I didn't feel uneasy. I didn't feel pressured. I felt something else entirely, curiosity. A quiet pull toward understanding whatever story was unfolding between us, one careful step at a time. I think I'd like that, I said, but slowly. I want to understand who you are now, not who you were back then. He nodded, relief flickering gently across his face. That's all I could hope for. The night air seemed to shift again, softer now, like the world itself approved of this careful, steady beginning. We stood there for another minute or two, not talking, just sharing the quiet, until I finally reached for my keys. I should get home, I said with a small smile. But I'm glad we talked. So am I, he answered. And as I walked toward my car, I realized that something in me felt lighter too, like a door that had been closed for years had finally creaked open, letting in a breath of fresh air I hadn't known I needed. The next morning I woke earlier than usual, not because of anxiety, but because my mind kept returning to the conversation in the parking area. The memory of it felt quiet and steady, like a soft hum lingering beneath the surface of an otherwise ordinary morning. I made coffee, opened the kitchen window, and let the cool air drift in while the first rays of sunlight stretched across the counter. I wasn't used to feeling this kind of calm curiosity. At my age, life tends to settle into familiar routines, good routines, comforting ones, but every now and then something shifts, reminding you that growth doesn't end just because the years advance. Sometimes someone from the past appears not to stir trouble, but to help you rediscover a part of yourself you'd forgotten. Later that afternoon, I found myself at a small local cafe I'd always liked, one with warm lighting and the gentle sound of conversation floating through the air. It was quiet enough to think, but lively enough that no one ever felt out of place. I wasn't meeting Eric there. We hadn't planned anything that soon. I simply wanted a place where I could sit with my thoughts, somewhere neutral and comfortable. I chose a table near the window, where I could watch people pass along the sidewalk. Older couples walked hand in hand, a young family pushed a stroller, a pair of teenagers laughed over something on a phone. Everyone seemed to be moving through their own stories, each with their own quiet moments of reflection and discovery. It struck me how life carries all of us forward, sometimes gently and sometimes with surprising turns. I stirred my coffee slowly, thinking about the expression in Eric's eyes the night before. There was no urgency in his voice, no push for my attention, just honesty, a rare kind of honesty that made me pause. I found myself wondering who he had become during those years away. People change in all sorts of ways. Sometimes they grow more patient, more grounded. Sometimes they simply grow into the person they always meant to be. My thoughts were interrupted when my phone buzzed lightly on the table. I glanced down. It was a message from Eric. "Thank you again for last night. It meant a lot. No pressure, but if you'd like to talk again sometime this week, just let me know. Hope your day is peaceful." I stared at the message for a few seconds, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through me. It wasn't the kind of message meant to sway or pull. It was considerate, respectful, and patient. And patience, I realized, was something I valued more now than I ever did in my younger years. I typed back a simple response. "Coffee sometimes sounds nice. Let's keep it easy. I hope your day is good as well." I set the phone down and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. There was no rush, no strong expectation, just an open door. And something about that felt right. A few days passed before we met again. This time we chose a small park with walking paths lined by tall, swaying trees. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting a warm, gentle shifting pattern on the ground as we walked. It felt natural, easier than I expected. We talked about where life had taken us, the struggles and quiet victories that had shaped our paths. Nothing dramatic, nothing overwhelming. Just two adults sharing stories, learning each other again in a slower, more deliberate way. He spoke about his work, the changes he'd made, the things he regretted leaving unresolved. I shared some of my own experiences, my challenges, the lessons I'd learned, the ways I had grown steadier with age. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone truly listened, not to respond, but to understand. At one point, as we paused near a bench overlooking a small pond, he looked at me with a thoughtful softness. "I'm not trying to undo time," he said quietly. "I just want to build something honest, even if it's just a friendship built on respect." Something in those words settled gently inside me, like a stone finding its place at the bottom of a clear stream. "I appreciate that," I said, "more than you know." We continued walking, no rush, no pressure, just steady steps beneath the shade of the trees. And somewhere along that path, I realized this wasn't about rekindling something old. It was about discovering something new. A connection grounded in mutual respect, emotional clarity, and the quiet understanding that life still holds room for meaningful moments, no matter how many years have passed. As the sun dipped lower, we returned to our cars. He gave a small wave, warm and grateful.